Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We are here to talk about warm calling, a sales approach that I guess sits somewhere between the extremes of cold calling and inbound selling. Warm calling typically involves reaching out to prospects who've had some form of prior interaction with your company. So, a webinar registration like this one, for example, could be a visit to your website, LinkedIn engagement, or a referral. What sets it apart from, I suppose, a cold call is not a shot in the dark. It gives your team the opportunity to outreach based on context, relevance, and existing interests. So today we're going to explore with two experts how to make warm calls feel like a natural continuation of your prospect's journey, not an interruption. And we're going to cover how to prepare for a warm call, what to say, how to position your value in a way that builds trust from the first few seconds, and ultimately work in a more effective way when you're doing your outreach. So before we go into this detail, I would love to introduce my two guests, Phil Mann and Tyler Witt, who are both extremely well versed in the merits of warm calling, both in previous roles and, of course, in their roles at Lead Forensics. Phil is responsible for enterprise sales for the business and has a B2B career spanning 17 years in sales. And Tyler is a senior leader in mid-market sales in the US, having worked in the B2B SaaS space across a number of leading businesses over the past 10 years. So welcome both.
Thanks, Kirsty.
I appreciate that I already gave kind of a brief synopsis of warm calling, but from someone who's an expert in the area, what is the big difference between warm calling and cold calling? Phil, can you help us with a bit of an explanation on that one?
Yeah, I think cold calling is definitely not a new term. It's been around for a while, but it's traditionally, colder lists, businesses who've sourced lists, bought lists, built lists, all that kind of good stuff. But traditionally, they are colder leads. That's why they call it cold calling. But warm calling is businesses who have shown intent in some way, shape, or form. It could have been webinar download. It could have been download on the website. It could have been just basically a website visit. There's some kind of intent, but more importantly, the timing. This is the timing in which we want to be engaging this business right now. So with cold calling, if you sourced 1,000 leads, none of them could have any interest in you in any way, shape, or form. But with warm calling, we know these businesses have some kind of intent and they know who you are. So that's the big difference.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It is timing because nobody who is smart is going to be cold calling businesses that aren't a fit for them. We know so much about, like we all refer to our ICP, like we know so much about businesses that we want to work with. However, it's finding those ones that are ready to work with us. And am I right in saying is that's where warm calling gives us the edge?
Yeah, absolutely. They know who you are. They're, engaged in your content in some way, and it's just the right time to engage in them. Absolutely. And like you said, you could have that list of 1,000 of your ICP, but there's no interest. So it's difficult. You can definitely turn water into wine with that list, and have smaller conversions, which is what we traditionally see over cold calling. But the conversions with warm calling are significantly higher.
Yeah, makes sense. And Taylor, what's the biggest misconception businesses have about warm calling?
Yeah, I think, it's funny just kind of hearing you say, I'll make the point of, it's funny because over the last, decade plus, we've really adopted this whole thing of like, solution selling, right, against feature selling and all that. And yet we still call people that haven't said, I have a problem, right? From the get go, we're just calling and saying, do you have a problem? How about now? How about now? How about now? Right? Like you look like somebody that might have a problem. So that's kind of funny. So, and we're just hoping they're like, oh, that's weird. You called today too. Yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest misconception is I think just kind of honestly that it exists. I think a lot of people still work in that mindset of there's really the two buckets, right? We got the inquiries, and that is the best lead. No salesperson is going to tell you that is not the best lead. Everybody knows it. And then the other is cold data, and I think like that's the misconception is a lot of times, and especially when you think about salespeople. I've been, in many sales roles, and I know these lists that kind of get pushed out of like you talk about, webinar signups or email clicks or something like that, right? Where those people have, we've established brand awareness, right? But I still, and some people may disagree, but I still kind of almost put those in a cold list, because we've made one step on that wrong, right? We
Yeah.
went from like right to an ICP, we don't know who they are, to like, look, at least they know who we are. That's brand recognition. That is a big move. I mean, I'm not trying to mitigate that move, but that is wildly different than somebody who's kind of seeking you out. So I think the big misconception is like, right, when we talk about warm calling, like, what is that bucket? Does that bucket truly exist? And I think a lot of companies just don't realize it really does. So if we look, you've got inquiries, you've got cold data, which maybe we've established awareness, but we haven't moved to that, right? They've self-identified, I have a problem, I'm in the market. That misconception of like they are out there, I think that's probably the biggest one that I still see on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I listening to you, I'm just going to pick up on a couple of things that you said there. Is one, the warm calling data, they've taken an action that it requires effort. So it's not, oh, I'm clicking through and responding to something you've sent to me, or I am physically going onto your website. I'm physically downloading that ebook. I'm physically, watching your video case studies. It's like they are making an effort. And then the difference between warm and cold is, those businesses are all a good fit, but 80-90% of them don't realize they've got a problem. So you're sifting through them to find the ones they've got a problem. Whereas with warm calling, they're the ones who are telling you, I've got that problem. So yeah, I think that just gives me even greater clarity on it. Thank you.
I always think of the old, like, you've got, right. So if you think about cars are the example I use all the time, right? If I send somebody an advert, either in the email or mail or whatever, and they look through that advert, like curiosity tire kickers, right? This is what they call them in the industry, is a tire kicker. That's the definition. That's wildly different than somebody that wakes up and goes to Google and says, financing for a new cars for sale near me. Like, that is just wildly different behavior. And again, I think that's what the misconception is. Some people still put those, partially because they've called so many lists of people that, like, oh, you own a car now? Would you be open to buying a new one? That's wildly different than, So I think that's exactly what you're saying is like, if you can get people to see there is a big line in the sand, and there's a big line in the sand between that and an inquiry, right? Those are still better yet. I think that's the important bit.
Yeah. So Phil, can you share some examples of where you've seen customers have success with warm calling? I think that'd be a really great way to get into the detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we've seen it so many times over the years. We speak to senior sales contacts, senior marketing contacts, C-suite owners, all that good stuff. And what we've seen, the biggest success is businesses who already have some kind of outbound function, or a team of hunters who are door knocking, cold calling. They're, shaking hands, kissing babies, whatever it is they're doing to drum up new business. But what we want to do is that team that's traditionally actioning colder outbound data, we just want to, keep that function doing exactly what they're doing, but just giving them warmer intent data. So we're not talking about reinventing the wheel or creating a brand new process, which is a lot of stress in every business. So what we're doing is just giving the existing process warmer data, whether it's, download of an ebook, webinars, website visitors, all that good stuff. So what we want to do is we just want to give the businesses who have seen the highest success is they're giving existing business units warmer data. And that's what this is all about.
And thinking about your previous career, am I right that that's how you started? You were one of those hunters who were like, oh my gosh, I'm used to working through this really cold data, and now you've given me this data with intent. It's changed my world. Like, what kind of differences in conversion were you seeing?
Yeah, that was it back in the day in 2010 or 2011. I don't even know how long ago it was. So I was an SDR in a a marketing company, and my job was to book appointments for the sales team. So I used to kind of be that cold caller, and we kind of got this new data source, and it was all about showing us who's on our website. And I had a choice to make 100 calls all day or find out who's visiting our website and see if I could find leads that way. So, and I had a lot of success with the the website visitors. But traditionally over the last couple of years, when listening to clients and businesses, in different forums talking about the conversions of intent data, so random cold calling data can range from 2 to 3% into a lead. Now, not to a sale, it's very different. You buy a list of 100 leads, ICP accounts, companies you'd love to work with, but they just haven't shown any kind of need or intent. Most, sales functions will generate a 2 to 3% lead conversion off the back of that. But with what clients are seeing and businesses we've spoken with, they're seeing anywhere from 10 to 14% conversions with this warmer data source. So it's 3-4x what they're currently doing. Again, it's the same team, they're just actioning different types of data. And again, that's what we're here to talk about.
That's funny. In you saying that, I was just thinking, like, I literally had that thought of, like, you buy that list of 100 and then you have somebody who's reaching out to it. And then that's like 2%. If you're good, if you're really good, let's be honest, right? That's 2%. And then how much investment do you have to make to support that person? And then if they don't make contact, how much investment do you make to then nurture that? Like, and all the thousands of dollars that go into taking that 2% to 4%. And you're saying, like, well, if with this, you can actually go from 2 to 10%, like that.
It's huge. The differences are huge, night and day.
To those hunters, like, people are already really familiar with connecting with buyers who haven't just come in with their checkbook open ready to purchase. They're used to working really hard on conversion, so they'll get an excellent result from it. And leading into that then, so you mentioned website visitors. I mean, these are a prime example of data that's right for a warm calling strategy. In your experience, Phil, what kind of behavioural signals from a website indicate that a lead is ready for that outreach?
Yeah, just before we kind of go into that, I think we should just talk about B2B websites just for a second. Like, if someone visits your website, a lot of businesses just overlook that that's intent, and we often talk about B2B websites. There's no funny cat videos or swimsuit models or anything like that. They're there for a reason, and, the success some of our clients have seen, the signals they're looking for is duration's a big one. Anything north of 18 seconds on a key product or service page could be really, really good engagement. Now, I'm not saying every single person that visits your website could be a potential lead. I don't think that's true. If, for example, if someone visits your homepage and bounces off, a lot of businesses don't really action that information. But if they're looking at your homepage, then their journey is product A, product B, product C, back to homepage, looking at contact us. There's very different types of behavior when it comes to, buying and selling. If I was trying to sell your business something, I might look at your homepage and your contact us page to get your phone number. But if I'm selling something, I'm not going to go onto 3 or 4 of your product pages for 20, 40 seconds at a time. So a couple of the key things would be duration. Anything north of 18 seconds is good engagement according to the Direct Marketing Association. What pages they're actually viewing. And one of the biggest things that I think is overlooked is when they're visiting your website multiple times. We have a little joke here. No one visits the wrong website twice. It's really straightforward. So if they're visiting your website twice and they're not actually contacting you, what's happening? If they don't reach out to you in a couple of days, their requirement isn't disappearing. They're speaking to other companies. They're in the research phase, while they're looking at 5 to 8 different companies. You're on a short list, they're doing their research, stuff like that. But if you were to engage them while they're in that buying process, that research phase, that's what our clients are seeing huge success. But 3 big things in short to answer your question would be what pages they're looking at, the duration, and how many times they're visiting the site. Those would be the big signals of intent.
Okay, so you've got that, and you've got your frequency, and you can see they're spending time on site. Tyler, how would you prioritize which visitors to call first, and what kind of data should you rely on?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, and I would add one other one is, how they got to the site. I think that's a big one that's often missed, right? Like, we see it all the time. Pay-per-clicks get more and more. It's funny. I see a lot of people where they talk about how there's other ways to market this and that. Just anecdotally watching day to day, looking at thousands of websites, I see more and more going to Google spend, and I think their share prices would back that up a little bit. So, like, I think how they're getting to the website shows the frame of mind a bit, so I mean, in terms of, the question of like, how am I going to prioritize that on a day to day? I mean, simple, right? Like, it's very simple. Is I'm going to look at, first of all, 2 buckets. Do I know them? Do I don't? Do I not know them? That's like my bucket number 1. I have, and really, when we talk about warm calling too, is I think a lot of times we think about just new, like there's so much activity. I mean, you think about still 17 years, right? Sitting in a chair, how many dozens, hundreds, thousands, right, of opportunities you have that have gone dormant, stalled, right? Nobody that's watching this right now has north of a 50% close rate. If you do, right, it's probably isn't the webinar for you. But just being right. So there's all these opportunities. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at. I'm going to prioritize those people that I see it every day. Taught you 6 months ago, 3 years ago. Person that worked here and all this knowledge is something different. They're on the website. That's like my first idea. Why? Because I know they're open to a conversation with Phil. I know there was, some consideration there, but I also know they didn't make a set. So I can reach out to them, get a connect. And then from there, I'm going with, those ones that, right, that is exactly who I want to speak to. And they're doing behavior that I find absolutely, oh yeah, that's fine. Looking at a pricing period, going to a contact to them and then further out, coming in from a food district, like, how can I buy this product? That's pretty high inside, I see those kind of things. So first is no, like there's a lot, like stalled ops kind of pipeline. Then the second is like just prioritizing based on, what the lowest thing fruit I can find based on, what they look like and what to get on the site.
And obviously, we are in lead forensics, so advocates of using warm data to prepare for our own calls. We're going to go for that low-hanging fruit first. Can you walk us through how your sales team prepare for a warm call?
Yeah, like, if you're making a cold call, you generally just, shooting your shot. You're just reaching out to a business who might not have a need or interest, and you're just doing what you'd normally do. You'd reach out to marketing director or sales director, whoever you're normally reaching out to. But with warm calling or intent data, that's what this is, first party intent data. If they visit your website, you know what industry they're in, what pages they're looking at on the website, what potential problems that they might have. And we're obviously going to give you the key suggested contacts. Now again, you're going to reach out to who you're going to reach out to anyway, so you don't need any solution for that. Who your kind of ICP job titles or personas are that you're going after. But the big things would be, let's say Kirsty's working for a manufacturing company and I'm logistics, so if I know that it's a manufacturing company visiting my website, I know what they've looked at, know what their journey is. I kind of know how I want to position the conversation. So it's all before I even pick up the phone, I kind of know what this business might be looking for and the problems that they might have. And I can completely tailor the questions I'm going to ask. And again, I know there's a need. I know there's some kind of intent there. And the old joke in sales is easy when you know 2 things. Number 1, if there is a need, they're on your website. And number 2, what that need is, which is the pages that they're looking at. And my questions for Kirsty would be entirely different. Hey, Kirsty, it's Phil calling from ABC Company. This is what we do. Work with a couple of businesses like yours in relation to maybe last mile services. I don't know if you guys are have any challenges in that at the moment, or who I might maybe need to speak to in regards to that. So again, like, just imagine that, the ears perking up on their side. So there's a lot of prep. There's a lot of obvious information that you can use before you even pick up the call. So it's really obvious prep.
Yeah, so it's like, so using those behavioral signals beyond the intent, but seeing actually, I guess, what they're interested in of yours, and then just tying that back as your own.
That's it.
So it's still hard to pick up the phone and speak to someone you haven't got a connection with, Tyler. So can you give some examples of some good conversation starters you might use when warm calling? Like, what is the best approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you ask it, and I definitely know we're talking about this in reference to, like, actually calling, but it's funny, through the years I've seen so many people, and I always think of this example. Phil, you remembered somebody who, get this, send them a copy of a book, right? And then follow up a few days later, right? So, I think it's one of those things where they're in market. So like, there isn't a bad way to do it. Not doing it is the only wrong answer. Like that is the only wrong answer. But yeah, I mean, typically, it's funny because selling lead forensics, like we literally will just kind of reach out to somebody and say, hey, love to show you how I got this, and kind of show them the example of them looking at it.
Of course,
like, because it's proof of concept. But even for our customers, like that upfront and honest isn't a bad approach, right? So I have a lot of customers. They'll say, reach somebody up and they'll say, hey, Phil, like maybe they'll put in a customer service bow, like, hey, Phil, we actually have something that kind of tells us on the website when our customers are looking, so we can offer the best service, right? Make sure they have their questions answered. I know you're not a customer, but it did happen to pick you up. Is there anything I can do to kind of help you out, right? Obviously a little bit cleaner than that, but you are being honest with them. You're telling them you have it, but you're kind of putting that customer service bow. So that's a pretty good one. Or just a coincidental, I mean, you give it a day, give it 2 days, right? Don't want to give it too long because they're already going to be filling out a form somewhere else by then. So you don't want to wait too long. But yeah, just to like, hey, hey, Kirsty, like, I don't know, had this, whatever, case study or something like that. Made me think of you. Or, hey, saw you did something on LinkedIn, right? Do a little research, tie it into something you see online, and then send them something that's maybe relevant to what they looked at on the website or something you saw on LinkedIn, right? So in that point, you're kind of using your general outreach approach. You're just doing it at the time they're actually in market, because, Phil know this, most people would. You can call, email, show up at a business. I mean, you could do it 50, 51 weeks out of the year and you just get nowhere. You literally have nowhere. Why? Because they're already with a vendor. They already have a solution. They haven't self-identified as a problem. Like they're just not in market. But if you reach out at the right time, good things will happen. And so those are typically the kind of 2 ways. But like I said, there's no real wrong way. The only wrong way is just not doing it at all.
I love that. I love not doing it. But a lot of people tend to obsess about, how do I, like, what do I do? Now I have this data, like, what do I do? It's like, Tyler mentioned the customer service approach, the white glove approach. Love that. The coincidental approach. Don't mention anything, but just I love what Tyler said there. The only wrong answer is not to do it. But my actual favorite answer is just do what you're normally doing, both with better intent data. It's physically impossible. If you have a successful cold calling function and you give them warmer data, there's no scenario where this doesn't work or you get worse conversion. So just do what you're already doing, reach out to who you're normally reaching out to with your normal strategy. And we know this business not only has intent, but they know who you are. They're on your website. They're looking at different things on your website and you know what to talk to them about. So just do what you normally do, but with a lot more confidence.
It's like having a store, right? You have the store and somebody walks in and you're like, what do I say? Just ask how you can help. Ask how you can help. That's a pretty good start. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think you're right. I think there is that, like, getting hung up on, well, how do I know if it was the person that I'm going to try and reach out to? But the reality is, and you said it earlier, like, who your buyers are, who those decision makers are. You reach them exactly the same way as you would do in a cold call, but that this business is interested. So great, feel happier jumping on the phone. So thinking about that team of hunters, then they're doing cold calling, they're doing warm calling. Like, how do they integrate both together into their daily workflows, Phil?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ideas around this. Like if you have like CRMs like Salesforce, HubSpot or Microsoft Dynamics, stuff like that, we can, funnel this data into that, and it could be real time, it can go to the right team, etc. But, even if you didn't have any of that fancy stuff, let's just say you have a team of hunters, let's just say 3 hunters, and they're making anywhere from 60 to 80 to 100 calls a day, whatever they're normally doing. The really simple answer would be, there's little daily reports that you can get from tools like ours, and just like, we know these are the businesses that hit the ICP on the website. They're all in industries we want to work with. They're all showing the right behaviors on their website, and they're all net new to us. Imagine, I walk in and Tyler walks in the morning, and we know we've got to make 60, 80, 100 calls, whatever it is. But, Kirsty, our managers, giving us a list of 15 businesses that hit the ICP that visited the website yesterday. And instead of calling the 80 random companies I was going to call, I'm still going to call those 65 companies that I was going to call, but I'm calling 15 warmer ones instead. So it's not about reinventing processes or kind of creating new processes. It's just, integrating this data to your current, workflow, and just, it could be as simple as just having an email in your inbox at 8 or 9 in the morning with, the best leads from the day before, and putting them on your list to action the same day.
So it's not changing what you're doing, it's just making it better and more efficient.
Yeah. And, Tyler kind of touched on something like, a lot of our clients aren't like, if you visit the website, you're not calling them 6 minutes later and saying, hey, Kirsty, what are you doing on our website? That's not what our top performing clients are doing. But there's a couple of different strategies. If I have like, one of my clients has like a drainage company, and like, if you're on this website, it's because you kind of have some kind of issue that like is more urgent than not. They tend to not wait a couple of days, so they might wait a couple of hours to see if that inquiry comes in, and if it doesn't, they're pretty on it. But a consulting company, big sales company might wait a day or two to reach out to see if they can just wait for the inquiry, and if it doesn't come, I'm not, we're not hoping they inquire. We have business strategies to go after businesses who are showing intent. So but yeah, opening an email in the morning and actioning the warmest leads from the day before is a really simple way to integrate this into your current stack.
Well, and you saying that, it's funny. I actually thought of the flip side.
Make your team happy.
Yeah. Like I think of like the flip side of like, if I've got like, let's say I have a very niche type of product and I have a actually fairly small TAM, right? So my total addressable market is like actually fairly small. I usually have a pretty good kind of history record of the accounts I can work with. And so when I have a customer I'm thinking of, without trying to say who they are, but like they will come in the morning, they know who this customer is, they know everything about it, but they haven't talked to them in a year or whatever, right? They have a relationship. And so they come in, they see it, and they literally just call and they just say, hey, Phil, how's the family? Right. That kind of, that's their outreach strategy on that, because again, they know it's going to lead to, oh, Tyler, glad you called. It's funny. We were just talking about you or whatever. So yeah, so you don't need to overthink it. Like, it's just go, right. Like, just go. Like, and who you have more success with, right? Calling Phil, how's your family? And then trying to find a way to talk about business. Or how about now, bud? You ready to buy now? Or, hey, like, Phil, how's your family? Like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Knowing they were just on there. Like, what's a better phone call?
Right.
And then I'm going to ask you, you've given some examples of like intros that you might use for warm calling. But what does a perfect warm call look like from your perspective?
Perfect. I mean, I don't know if there's any such thing as perfect. I mean, no, the perfect is this, is look, I see who it is. I see, this is my ICP customer. And again, they looked at one or two pages. I want to go after them. It's just contact. To me, the perfect is contact, because if let's take you, for example, you obviously run a marketing department, right? You got several people and all the people that work with you are tasked with doing very important things. And you trust them to kind of do those, right? So off they go. So they may be looking at something, and maybe that is a person that is tasked, right? So you have somebody on your team that's tasked with getting this information. If I reach out and I talk to one of them, or if I talk to you, it doesn't matter who owns that specific project, because as long as I make contact, you're going to be able to say like, oh yeah, Tyler, I'm glad you called. That's something I'm working on. Or you're going to say, well, you know what? Actually, that would be handled by this person. And as long as I can make contact, so the perfect one to me is just one that ends in contact, because the moment I make contact with anybody in that business, it doesn't have to be you. I could call Phil, and Phil could probably say, well, that's not me. Go talk to this person, because they're going to know who in that business would be tasked with that particular thing that I sell. Yeah. Right. And again, like, if you're, as a business, if you're like, well, ours, blah, 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 it's like, well, you may need to define what solution you have, right? That might be a different problem, because the perfect call to me is just one that ends up in contact, because the moment I get contact, I get a name. I can get more information.
Yeah.
You can take it from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Timing, you said, obviously you don't pick up the call 6 seconds after they've been on the website. But have you got stats? Have you done some testing to, I guess it might range from industry to industry, but how does timing impact success rates in terms of how quickly we follow up?
Yeah, I think it's very situational. I don't think there's a black or white answer there. I think it hugely depends on the sales cycle. As I kind of touched on, a business who maybe has like a more urgent service offering or product offering might be important for them to follow up, same day or within 24 hours, but definitely not, straight away. I don't think, it gives the right vibe, and people tend to, not be too receptive to that. But I think if the sales cycle's, pretty quick, I'd be reaching out later that day or the following day. But if it's a longer sales cycle, it's a consulting offering. The sales cycle could be 6 to 12 months, waiting a day or two for the inquiry just to see if it comes in, which unfortunately most of the time it doesn't, but, waiting a business day or two to kind of engage is what a lot of, clients will do with warm calling, but it really depends on the situation. So it's a vague answer, but there's no right or wrong, but the only wrong answer, as kind of Tyler mentioned, is not actioning the data at all.
Yeah, I suppose going back to that point, if they visited and not made the inquiry and potentially they've made it somewhere else, you get yourself back in the game, don't you?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Like
absolutely.
you're part of the process again, whereas maybe you might not have been if your website or the information that you presented to them then didn't do the trick on that day. You've got a second chance.
Yeah, to an extent, time and time again, they come out with studies of like, it depends on the exact one, but it'll be 70 to 80% of like, you literally win it just because you were the first person on the phone.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge component that you do want to consider, because anybody in sales knows, like even on an inquiry, if they've already talked to 3 or 4 companies by the time they're inquiring with me, that is a tough uphill battle, because there's all kinds of things I'm not competing against, not just competing for a solution. So, yes, like, absolutely, but again, I guess I think sometimes that perfection, right, is the enemy of just progress. And I think sometimes people get in like, well, when should I reach out? How should I do this? It's like, just go. And, even if there is that, like, oh, well, how did you get that? A cold caller right now, Phil will make a cold call right now. And somebody's like, how'd you get my contact? That question comes just on a cold list. So worrying about, am I going to get that question? I mean, maybe sometimes, right? But you get that even when I just go to Google and pull down a list. I had it just this morning. I heard a call where somebody's like, how'd you get my info? And it's like, they're just on their website calling their main line. Like, are you asking me how I got your phone? I don't understand. So I think just, reach out, but know that time kills deals.
So just on that, final point for me would be, I had someone say this to me once and it didn't go away. And I kind of think it's really relevant. If they don't reach out in 2 or 3 days, the owner of the business in question said, well, after 3 days, if they don't inquire, I'm now just going after my competitors' leads. Yeah. And I love that, because if you think about it, again, it's a really, really key point to observe here. If they don't reach out to you, their requirement is not disappearing. They are absolutely speaking to other businesses. And if you're not reaching out to them, they're your competitors or business in your space are more than likely having conversations with them.
Great. And apart from just doing it, Phil, where do most teams go wrong when they're trying to turn intent-based interactions into those, like, ready to convert SQLs?
Yeah, I think, businesses can go wrong. I think the most important thing would be giving it to the wrong people. I think, there's a lot of sales people that, aren't necessarily designed to be hunters, so if it falls in the wrong hands, are they going to be excited to action it? So that's maybe an area they go wrong. But if you give this to a hunter who's making 50, 70, 100 calls a day, and you tell them, hey, I know this business is in the market right now, get after it, they're going to be all over it, So the first thing is just, making sure the right people are actioning it. But number 2 is making sure they're excited about it. This isn't just a normal list. This isn't like, a list you can buy from any list company online. These businesses, again, they're in the market. They know who you are. They are on your website. They're looking at your product service. So again, people see significantly, higher conversions with this warm calling. So I think just getting them excited about the list. Another thing is just, maybe obsessing about finding the exact person who's been on your website. That's not what it's about at all. It's really, really not. It's not an individual need. There's no one. Tyler's not hiding under a desk, with it on a post-it. Like, I need, event stand right now. He's not doing that. It's a team of people. It's a business need. So if you reached out to anyone in their marketing department, they're going to know there's some kind of need for a new event stand or an exhibition stand, whatever it might be. So it's not, this data is not a hole in one, but it's very much, we're going to get you on the green, and this business has intent. We know what they're looking for. They're in the market right now, etc. So I think, not obsessing about finding the exact person, and then maybe just kind of understanding that it's a process. It's not going to work every single time. I would love to say it would work every time. It's just not realistic. But if you repeat the process enough times over the course of a week, a month, a quarter, a year, it's not a question of if you're going to see success. It's just how much more success you're going to see against your current process. If your current process is cold calling and you're still being successful, keep doing that. But we just want to enhance that process by giving them much warmer data, intent data. These businesses have visited multiple times, they're looking at key pages. So those, I think, would be the the common mistakes or challenges that businesses might face.
Then I guess, to summarize from both of you, what is the number one piece of advice you'd give to a sales team that's just getting started with warm calling? What would be your top piece of actionable insight? Something a business could take away and go, I'm going to use that. And I want at least one from both of you, please.
Phil, you go first.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think the biggest one is just the education piece, where this data is coming from, why it's so valuable, what we can do with it, the different conversion rates you're going to see, just education. It's not like, oh, hey, Tyler, I've got this new list for you, give those guys a call. That's not, Tyler's just not going to be in the, right space to do that. So I think just the education on why a website visitor could be really, really valuable. So that's probably the biggest advice from me. If you just bought, an intent data solution like lead forensics, just get your team excited about it and tell them why it's so valuable, because it really is.
I suppose it's consistent education as well. It's not like one and done. It's like reminding them every day what they're seeing and how to use that, and then they just get better and better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, kind of in that same line, I think, number one thing for me is, like, don't hold it against your sales team that they didn't like the last list you gave them, right? I think a lot of times we tend to kind of say, we gave them these lists, it didn't work, blah, blah, blah. So allow them the opportunity, right? They want to be successful. Every salesperson wants to be successful. They want to hit targets. They want to make commission. Like, they really, really do. So kind of off of the back end of Phil's, like, it's educating them and kind of letting go of the fact that, yep, the last list we gave didn't work. Well, because it wasn't in that warm data set. I think that's probably the biggest piece is forgive, educate, and move on.
Yes. Well, I think if I was to summarize, I think this intent and this warm data is great for your hunters. Like, you've got hunters in your team. This is like Christmas has come.
It
is.
Yeah.
And it is just a case of incorporating it into your process. But but knowing that you can do that confidently because the timing is right. And make such a difference. So thank you, both of you, so much for the insight you've given us. Really appreciate your time today. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Kirsty.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.